Ruthless bikers surround a family's car. The dad's next move leaves them in total shock. The winding road stretched before them, empty and quiet as the family made their way home after a long day. The only sound was the hum of the car's engine and the soft conversations between the family members. The headlights of their red sedan cut through the dark night, illuminating the road ahead, the trees on either side looming in shadows. Inside the car, the father, Michael, glanced at his wife, Sarah, who was sitting next to him, her tired eyes reflecting the exhaustion of the day. In the back seat, their young son, Liam, was fiddling with a toy, his quiet hum of contentment the only noise that broke the otherwise peaceful atmosphere. As the car cruised through the open stretch of road, the distant roar of engines suddenly cut through the silence, sharp and unsettling. Michael instinctively tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the sound grew louder, now unmistakably close. He glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing as he saw a group of motorcycles coming up behind them, their headlights blinding in the darkness. Sarah's voice broke the stillness. "What is that noise?" "I don't know," Michael said, his voice steady, but his eyes scanning the rearview mirror. "Just stay calm." The group of bikers grew closer, their engines roaring as they surrounded the family's car. Michael's heart began to race as he instinctively slowed down, trying to create space between them, but the bikers were relentless. They moved quickly, closing in from every direction. There was no way out. Within moments, the bikers had formed a barricade around the family's car, their motorcycles blocking the road in all directions. The headlights illuminated the figures, all clad in black leather jackets and helmets, their faces obscured but their postures menacing. Michael's pulse quickened. He glanced at Sarah, her face a mirror of concern, and then at Liam, who had stopped playing with his toy and was now staring wide-eyed at the bikers. The young boy instinctively grasped his mother's arm. Michael took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "Just stay calm," he said again, more to reassure himself than anyone else. The leader of the bikers, a tall, muscular man with a thick beard, dismounted from his bike and approached the family's car. He was followed by the rest of the gang, who stood in a loose circle around the car, blocking any chance of escape. "Looks like you're in a bit of a tight spot," the leader said, his voice gruff and full of mockery. He leaned in toward the car, his helmet reflecting the dim light. "We don't take too kindly to people driving through our territory." Michael's heart pounded in his chest. He had been in situations like this before, but never with his family in the car. His instincts told him to stay calm, to not provoke them. He kept his hands steady on the wheel. "We're just trying to get home," Michael said, his voice firm but measured. "We didn't mean any trouble." The leader smirked. "Well, now you've got some trouble. See, you're in our way, and we don't like people who think they can just pass through without paying their dues." Michael's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. There was no way to go backward. The bikers had effectively trapped them. His mind raced, weighing his options, but he knew the situation was already escalating. The bikers started to shout, their voices growing louder, taunting the family with crude comments. One of them, a tall figure with a scar across his cheek, slammed his fist on the hood of the car. "Think you're too good for us?" he sneered. "What do you think you're gonna do now, huh? You think we're just gonna let you go?" Michael kept his calm, but his thoughts were moving quickly. He didn't know how many of the bikers were armed, but he couldn't risk making a rash move with Sarah and Liam in the car. He looked over at his wife, her hand gripping her son tightly. She was terrified, but trying her best to hide it. "Michael, what are we going to do?" Sarah whispered urgently. Michael took a deep breath, his eyes shifting back to the bikers. "Stay calm. Let me handle this," he said, trying to offer a sense of reassurance, even if he wasn't entirely sure what to do himself. The leader, seeing the family's apprehension, grinned wider. "What's the matter? You scared? Huh? How about you hand over some of that cash in your wallet? Maybe we'll let you go." Michael's chest tightened, but he didn't respond immediately. He knew that giving them what they wanted could make things worse. The bikers didn't look like they were just looking for money. They were enjoying the fear they were creating. The leader leaned in closer, his face inches from Michael's. "What's the matter?" You think you can just ignore us? Maybe I'll make you regret that. That was when Michael made his move. The leader of the bikers stood right in front of the family's car, his shadow looming large as the rest of the gang moved in behind him, blocking every possible exit. The steady hum of their motorcycles vibrated through the air, and the sound of their boots against the pavement sent an uncomfortable shiver down Michael's spine. They were clearly enjoying this moment, pushing the family into a corner, knowing that they had the upper hand. The leader leaned closer to the window, his breath fogging the glass for a moment before he wiped it away with his gloved hand. "You don't get to just pass through here like you own the place," he said, his voice low but thick with menace. "You owe us something for your arrogance. You think you're too good for us?" Michael swallowed hard. His mind was racing, but he forced himself to stay calm. His primary concern was Sarah and Liam. He needed to get them out of this situation safely. He had been in tight spots before, but never like this, and never with his family at risk. He glanced at Sarah, who had her hand over Liam's, trying to comfort him as he trembled, clearly terrified by the scene unfolding before him. His heart ached seeing his son so frightened. "Just let us go," Michael said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We don't want any trouble." The leader's grin widened. "Well, you've got it now," he said, backing up slightly. He raised his hand and motioned to the others. "You see, this is where the fun begins." The gang laughed, and Michael felt the air in the car grow heavier. He couldn't let fear take hold. He had to keep his composure. He looked at Sarah, her worried expression matching his own. He could tell she wanted to say something, but she was holding back, knowing that saying anything could escalate the situation. The leader turned to one of the bikers, a large man with a tattoo of flames running up his arm. "You know what to do," he said with a nod. The biker grinned and walked toward the car's rear, his boots heavy on the ground. Michael's pulse quickened as he saw the man approach. Was he going to break the window? Was this about to get violent? "Michael, please," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "What are we going to do?" He took a deep breath, his eyes flicking between the leader and the rest of the bikers, trying to figure out their next move. He could see the way the gang moved like a pack of wolves, circling, waiting for the right moment to pounce. But Michael knew something they didn't. He wasn't going to be caught off guard. Not now. His mind flashed back to the time when he was younger, back when he was involved in something much darker than anything the bikers could ever understand. But those days were long behind him. They had to be. He had built a life with his family, a life that was far from the violence of his past. But deep down, he knew there was still something inside of him, something that hadn't faded with the years. The biker at the rear of the car knocked on the window with his fist, the sharp sound making Liam jump. Michael held his breath, trying to control the tightness in his chest. He had to think fast. The leader of the group circled back around to the window, grinning. "This is your last chance," he said. "Give me what we want and we'll let you go. Otherwise, we're taking what's ours." Michael's fingers curled around the steering wheel, and his grip tightened as he weighed his options. There was no way he was letting his family get hurt, but the bikers clearly weren't the type to back down easily. His next move had to be calculated. He couldn't let them think they had won. Sarah's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Michael, please just give them what they want." "I can't." Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. "I can't lose you or Liam. Please." The urgency in her voice hit him like a punch to the gut. She was scared. He could see it in her eyes. Michael nodded, his expression hardening as he shifted his gaze back to the leader of the bikers. "I'm not going to hand over anything," he said quietly but firmly. "This is my family, and you won't get away with this." The leader's smile faltered for a second, but he quickly regained his composure, as if the words had never affected him. "You think you can stop us? We're just getting started, old man." Michael's breath caught, but he held his ground. He wasn't going to let them intimidate him any longer. With a deep breath, he slowly pulled out his phone, pressing a button under his seat, hidden from the gang's view. His fingers hovered over the screen as he prepared for his next move, praying that he had enough time. Behind the car, the biker who had knocked on the window was still standing there, waiting. The leader of the gang looked at him and nodded, signaling to move ahead with their demands. But the seconds were ticking away. Michael had to act now. The bikers remained where they stood, their motorcycles creating a wall of intimidation around the family's car. Michael's pulse thudded in his ears, his grip tightening around the steering wheel. He could feel Sarah's trembling beside him, but her silence was a constant reminder of the danger they were in. Liam's fearful eyes met his in the rearview mirror, and Michael did his best to mask his own fear. "I'm not going to let them hurt us," Michael murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The leader of the bikers stepped closer, now just inches from the window, his tall frame casting a long shadow over Michael's face. His hand rested on the door, and his voice was low, dripping with authority. "What do you think, old man? You think you can just drive through here without paying for the privilege?" Michael held his breath. He needed to remain calm, stay in control. He couldn't allow the bikers to see his fear, but there was no denying the rising tension. The leader's words hung in the air like a threat, every syllable calculated to break down Michael's resolve. "I've got nothing to give you," Michael said evenly. "We just want to leave. Let us go, and there won't be any trouble." The leader smirked. "That's where you're wrong, friend. You've already made the mistake of thinking you're in charge here. You're not. We control this road, and now you're part of the deal." Michael's heart began to race. The leader's words were like daggers, meant to disarm him. But the more they spoke, the more the old warrior in Michael's mind stirred. He'd been in dangerous situations before, fought battles where life and death hung by a thread. He didn't back down then, and he wasn't about to now. But something was different this time. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. "We're not here to fight," Michael said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Please, just let us go." One of the other bikers, a large man with tattoos covering both arms, leaned in closer, his voice carrying an edge of malice. "What, you think we're just gonna let you off the hook? You think you can walk away from this? You owe us, and you're gonna pay one way or another." Michael knew that pleading wouldn't work. The bikers were enjoying their control, relishing the power they had over him and his family. His mind worked quickly, trying to find an opening, but there was no easy way out. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror again, scanning for any sign of help, any possible escape. But the road was empty. The leader leaned in once more, his breath fogging the window. "You're gonna give us your cash, your valuables, and whatever else you've got in there. Otherwise, we're taking more than just that." Michael's mind raced. He needed a way out. But as he glanced at Sarah, her face pale with fear, and then at Liam, his wide eyes reflecting the terror of the situation, Michael knew he couldn't let them see his hesitation. He had to be strong for them. He reached slowly into his pocket, pulling out his wallet as though to comply. The bikers watched with bated breath, waiting for him to hand over the money. But just as his hand moved to open the wallet, he made his move. With a sharp movement, Michael pressed the button under the seat, and the car doors locked with an audible click. His fingers brushed against the hidden device beneath his jacket, a small but crucial piece of technology. In the space of just a few seconds, Michael had activated his silent emergency alert, sending a distress signal to the local police. The bikers froze for a moment, confused by the sudden change. Michael, sensing his small window of opportunity, kept his cool. He knew it would take time for the authorities to arrive, but the bikers didn't know that. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Michael had regained control of the situation. The bikers didn't realize that his calm demeanor wasn't just the result of fearlessness. It was a calculated response, a move designed to keep them off balance. "What's the matter?" the leader asked, taking a half step back, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What are you playing at?" Michael's jaw tightened, but he didn't give away anything. His heart raced, but his hands stayed steady. The sirens were still distant, but they were getting closer. He could hear the faint echo of them in the background, and for the first time, a small sense of hope bloomed in his chest. He had a chance. "We're not interested in your games," Michael said, his voice suddenly stronger. "You don't control us. This ends now." The leader looked at him for a long moment, confusion flickering in his eyes. He had expected resistance, yes, but not this. Not this level of composure from someone he had pegged as weak, as just another victim to bully. The other bikers started to murmur among themselves, their postures shifting slightly, unsure of how to handle the new tension in the air. The leader turned his back briefly, scanning his crew for reassurance. And that was when Michael saw it, a flicker of doubt, just enough for him to know that the bikers were beginning to second-guess their decision. The seconds dragged by like minutes, each one hanging in the air thick with tension. Michael kept his gaze fixed on the leader, his expression calm, but inside, his pulse raced. The bikers had surrounded the car, blocking any escape route, but now something had changed. The leader, once so confident and eager to push his dominance, now hesitated. His eyes flicked nervously from Michael to his gang, and Michael could almost see the shift in the air, the unease spreading through the group. The sirens were closer now, the faint but growing wail of police cars becoming more distinct with every passing second. Michael had activated the emergency alert just moments ago, and although it would take time for the authorities to arrive, it was enough to make the bikers rethink their approach. "What's the matter?" The leader spat, his earlier bravado fading. "You think this is gonna stop us?" Michael didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to stop you, but you're going to regret what happens next." For a moment, the bikers didn't move, the silence between them and Michael growing thicker. Michael's hand remained steady on the steering wheel, his eyes never leaving the leader. Sarah was gripping Liam's hand so tightly, her knuckles white, but she stayed quiet. The tension was unbearable, but Michael refused to let fear show. The leader turned to his gang, his voice low and demanding. "What are you waiting for? Grab their stuff." But there was hesitation in his voice now. His gang didn't move immediately. The uncertainty was palpable. Michael saw the flicker of doubt spread among the bikers. The leader turned back to Michael, his face now twisted with frustration. "You think you're clever, huh?" Michael didn't respond. He didn't need to. The bikers were already losing their nerve. The subtle shift in their behavior told him everything. They weren't sure what to do next, and that was his advantage. "Listen," Michael said, his voice even and measured. "You've already made a mistake, but you don't have to make another one. Just walk away, and this ends right here." The leader stepped back, glancing at his gang. There was no longer a sense of certainty in his actions. He looked to his bikers, who were still standing rigidly around the car, but they were no longer as aggressive. They were beginning to feel the weight of the situation, the knowledge that they might be out of their depth. Then, the sound of the sirens grew louder, cutting through the stillness. The bikers' heads snapped toward the sound, their eyes widening in realization. The police were close, very close. The leader, still trying to maintain his composure, glanced over his shoulder, calculating the risk. "You think the cops are going to help you?" The leader sneered, but his voice lacked conviction. "You think we're scared of a few sirens?" Michael could see it now. The doubt was turning into fear. The bikers had been out for power, to intimidate, but the realization that they were about to face the consequences of their actions made them hesitate. Michael could feel it. It was the moment he had been waiting for. "Get back in your cars," Michael said firmly, his tone unwavering. "The police are already on their way. You don't want to make things worse." The leader gritted his teeth, his face turning red with frustration. His hand hovered near his waist, as if considering a move. But then, as the sirens grew closer and the shadows of police lights flashed on the road, the leader let out a sharp exhale. "Let's go," he barked to his gang. The bikers didn't hesitate this time. One by one, they turned on their motorcycles, the roar of their engines breaking the silence as they slowly began to retreat. The leader cast one last, lingering glance at Michael, his eyes narrowing, as if weighing whether to make one final move. But the hesitation in his eyes said it all. He knew this was no longer a fight they could win. The group of bikers, once so confident, now retreated into the night, their engines fading into the distance. The sound of the sirens grew louder, and Michael watched as the last of the bikers sped away. The police, having arrived just in time, passed by the family's car, but the bikers were already gone. Michael exhaled, his body finally releasing the tension it had been holding for what felt like an eternity. He turned to Sarah, who was now breathing a little easier, though her eyes were still wide with fear. Liam, sensing the change, slowly let go of his mother's hand and smiled faintly, the grip of terror loosening around him. The police car passed them by, the officers inside taking note of the family, but their focus remained on the road. The bikers were gone. The danger was over. Michael didn't need to say anything. The family knew they were safe. They were still shaken, but they had made it through. Michael glanced at Sarah, offering a small, reassuring smile, his eyes tired but proud. "We're okay," he said softly. Sarah nodded, squeezing his hand. You handled that better than I ever could have." Michael smiled, though the weight of the situation still lingered in his chest. "I just had to think fast. That's all." As they pulled away from the now empty road, Michael couldn't shake the sense of unease. It had been too close, but they had survived, and that was what mattered. The sound of the bikers' engines faded into the distance, and with it, the tension that had held the family captive for what felt like an eternity began to dissipate. Michael slowly exhaled, his grip on the steering wheel loosening, though his heart still beat heavily in his chest. He kept his eyes on the rearview mirror for a few more seconds, just to be sure, before glancing at Sarah. Her face, once pale with fear, now held a look of quiet relief, though the terror of the encounter hadn't entirely left her eyes. Liam, who had been so quiet during the confrontation, now let out a deep sigh and rested his head against the window, finally allowing the tension in his young body to ease. "They're gone," Michael said softly, trying to reassure them both, though he, too, needed the confirmation. "We're okay." Sarah nodded, her lips trembling as she turned to look at him. "I don't even know what to say. That was too close. I didn't know what we were going to do." "I didn't either," Michael admitted, his voice heavy with the weight of what had just happened. "But we're safe. That's what matters." The car was filled with the soft hum of the engine as Michael began driving again, the headlights of the road now stretching out before them. The eerie calm that followed the bikers' retreat settled in, but it was a calm that couldn't erase the adrenaline still coursing through Michael's veins. He had acted quickly, but it had been a gamble, one that could have gone terribly wrong if the bikers hadn't hesitated. "So what now?" Sarah asked, her voice quieter now, but still tinged with a hint of anxiety. Michael glanced over at her, his eyes still focused on the road ahead. "We keep going. We're not going to let that stop us." There was a long pause as they drove in silence. Michael thought back to his reaction, his decision to play it cool, to let them think they had control, all while he carefully executed his plan to send out the emergency signal. It had worked, but it hadn't been without risk. His heart pounded a little slower now, the calm setting in as he felt the familiar rhythm of the road beneath the wheels. But his mind kept replaying the scene, the fear in Sarah's eyes, the terror in Liam's face. He couldn't let that image haunt him. "What if they come back?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "What if they're just lying in wait?" Michael shook his head, though the question still lingered in the back of his mind. "We'll be ready if they do, but I don't think they'll be back. We've seen what they're made of." He didn't know for sure. There were always risks, always unknowns. But in that moment, he believed the bikers had underestimated them. They hadn't expected Michael to act so decisively, to stay calm when the world seemed to spin out of control. The bikers were all about power, about intimidation. But they had learned the hard way that strength wasn't just about being loud or aggressive. Sometimes it was about knowing when to stand your ground and when to wait for the right moment to act. The city lights began to appear in the distance, the glow of the streets welcoming them home. Michael turned off the main road and onto a smaller street, his mind already beginning to relax, the weight of the night slowly lifting. He glanced over at Sarah and Liam. They were safe. That was the only thing that mattered now. "I think we could all use a long nap," Michael said, trying to lighten the mood as he parked the car in front of their house. He turned to Sarah with a tired smile. "Maybe we'll even take a day off from everything tomorrow." Sarah smiled, though it was faint. "That sounds like a good idea," she replied, her voice soft. A whole day of peace. Michael got out of the car, walking around to open Liam's door. He helped his son out and gave him a reassuring pat on the back. The boy, still a little shaken, gave him a tired smile and reached for his hand. They walked up to the front door together, the soft creak of the door opening marking the end of the long night. As the family stepped inside, Michael locked the door behind them, finally feeling the weight of the world ease from his shoulders. They were home, safe, and as he turned to face his family, a sense of relief washed over him. Even if the night's events had left their mark, Michael knew that what had happened tonight would stay with them, that the fear would linger for a while. But he also knew that they had come through it together, that they had faced danger head-on and survived. And that made all the difference. As he settled in beside Sarah and Liam, the room quiet and peaceful, Michael closed his eyes for just a moment, allowing the adrenaline to fade. They were safe. That was all that mattered.